That's right. So since you entered the school of life, right? You basically left Princeton, but you entered the school of life. What was fundraising like back then for you for a warm poop company that nobody would fund? How did you fund yourself going forward?
You're expected to do a .com, right, or some IT thing. That's what investors will gravitate towards. So at the beginning, it was hard always, just to be clear. The first successful capital to come in was actually us entering and winning business plan contests. So we would go around and enter every business plan contest we would find. The first half a dozen to a dozen we'd fail, but every time we learned, and through failure you learn a lot. And we got pretty good at winning them. And so the first $100,000 that came into the company was winning a handful of business plan contests after losing many. That then pivoted to the ability to go find angel investors who would give $25,000, $50,000 checks, and that became sort of the funding strategy for the first few years.
And TerraCycle had an angel investor who was literally an angel, Martin Stein. In what way did Martin support you and the development of the company?
I think Marty had two really important sort of pieces, to answer your question. I think first, yes, he invested disproportionately. Like his first check to us was $500,000. I mean, I'd never had a check that large before. But more important than the money was this thing that Marty did. I remember I was living in the basement office, and he was probably at the time like in his late 60s. He would call me at like 2 a.m. And he knew I was there in the office. So it sort of gave him a kick that the guy's there working any hour. And he would call and he would ask about how the business is going, and we'd have our chat. He'd give some advice, this sort of thing. But most importantly, he always finished the call with this statement. He goes, "So Tom, I just want you to know if TerraCycle goes belly up, here's what I want you to do." And every time, he sort of asked it, the feeling that comes through is like, what, you want me to now wash dishes till I earn your money back? Because that's the mentality of Europe and, that sort of thing, right? And he always said, no, I want you to call me with whatever your next idea is. And I want you to know, no matter what it is, I'm in, no problem. And what that fueled the ability to, let's play, let's take risk, let's do this, right? And that was so important. And I think this is so unique to the American culture, is people like Martin, where he himself, inherited his parents' failed deli, at the age of 30, basically finished up a bankruptcy on a deli and built a real estate empire and did incredibly well from nothing, just with his own wits. And I think what's so unique that he taught me is to make a successful entrepreneurial culture, like a country culture. You don't just need people, who are willing to invest. Much more importantly, is willing to invest after failure. This is critical. Many countries, you don't have culturally, it's unacceptable to fail. Germany, right? If you start a company and bankrupt it, you are legally barred from starting another company again. Here, in the US, you can bankrupt the company in the morning and reincorporate in the evening, and off you go. And I think it's not about seeking failure, certainly not, but it's about being able to embrace failure and not let it become detrimental. Because if you create that feeling, no one's going to take the risk. Today we take Marty's lesson, and every time we have a challenge that comes up, and certainly there are many, the more we innovate, in fact, the more challenges that occur. We always start a meeting where we debrief a challenge by saying, okay, we invested this much time and money, it didn't work. Let's view that as tuition. So what did we learn from that tuition so that we can honor the failure? And you know what? Everyone around the table relaxes a bit because everyone's worried about being chewed out for the failure. And if you do that, they'll never put an idea on the table again.
I totally agree with you, because I think that there's been so many learning moments when you do a startup, right? So it's important to see it as learning moments, and instead of seeing it as failure, like I've failed, right? But really turn it into a lesson. I think is really, really important.
Yeah, exactly. To build on what you're saying, I mean, isn't that what school is? We pay a lot of money for tuition and produce zero consequential work product, right? No essay, no test will actually build a building, save a life, do anything consequential. It's all pointless from a consequence point of view. And how does it help the world, right? Um, that is tuition. We pay for that, right? And in fact, that is a exact parallel to what it's like to invest in a failed idea. You get learning out of it. But if you don't honor the learning, then it's like paying tuition to a school and not showing up for class.
That's right. That's right. There's a famous story about you turning down $1 million from Carrot Capital. Well, you only had $500 in the bank. Something that I could totally relate to, by the way. So tell us about that.
So this was a moment where we had in between the raising capital on business plan contest and raising capital from real investors. So we'd raised about 100 grand from business plan contest, and Carrot Capital was a business plan contest, but for $1 million, and we won the thing. And we were out of money at the time, all right, basically no cash. And the Carrot Capital management team said, "Look, you guys have a really cool story here with the worm poop, um, but we don't like the team you put together, Tom, and we want you to not focus too much on this garbage idea, but just do a nice organic fertilizer. Like we carrot people, we think we can roll you up into a nice brand, and off you go." They may not have been wrong, by the way, right? There's many paths to take, but they were jeopardizing two very important things to me. One is that I didn't start TerraCycle to be a fertilizer company. I got excited about the idea of waste, and the first way to address waste was to produce fertilizer. And the second was, people like Robin and others who were sleeping literally on the office floor and sacrificing. I felt like a loyalty and a responsibility to them, right? And they wanted me to abandon both those ideas. And again, there's no right or wrong, but to me, those were not things I would compromise on. And we said no to the money. It was very tough, though, because we came back very elated, but incredibly poor. And then the next conversation was, what do we do to not bankrupt the business? And in fact, out of that desperate moment, the biggest innovation for the worm poop project occurred, which is we said, we got to start selling this stuff. But since we couldn't afford packaging, we said, why don't we start packaging quite literally in garbage? Why don't we just go through all the recycling containers in the town of Princeton and just fill them and sell them and start making money that way? And that actually turned out to be such a profound innovation of making a product out of garbage and packaging it in garbage that it's how the biggest retailers, Walmart, Home Depot, and others, gave us a shot.
And you created this idea behind the bottle brigade. What is the bottle brigade?
Desperation, we said, let's package and use soda bottles, like use Coke and Pepsi bottles. And that created, the product. And we, through just a lot of persistence, got meetings at the big retailers. For fertilizer, it's important to note, 4 retailers control the U.S. market. Home Depot, Lowe's, Walmart, and Target. That's it. That's 90% of the fertilizer business in the U.S. And we got meetings with them, and more or less in some order, they all said yes. But we had to now get a bunch of used soda bottles, right? You can't just order them, and be like, look, I want truckloads of used soda bottles. That it doesn't work that way. And especially uncrushed ones, not damaged ones. And so we said, why don't we go to schools and and ask them to collect for us? And that created this thing called the Bottle Brigade, where we would go to schools and basically say, can you collect used soda bottles? We'll give you 5 cents per bottle, to your school, and we'll pick them up, and then we'll wash them out and fill them with worm poop. And that's how we ended up getting our packaging. There's a subtext to this, which is it also became the underlying idea of what we ended up evolving into. And that was, but that's how it all began, was getting bottles for the worm poop.
And as you mentioned, TerraCycle secured its first high profile clients with Home Depot and Walmart Canada. Can you tell us how you went about signing these 2 retailers? Because it seems like it quite a daunting task to do for a very small startup.
And this comes down to, I think, the biggest lesson I learned in this story, and I still look in people, is I think the what really separates successful entrepreneurs and team members, from others, is the ability to grind. And the way we got these retailers was entirely a grind. You can't just call them and they won't just give you a meeting. So we just called every hour, different phone numbers. Back in the day, that's how it was done. And we did this for like a month, 10 calls a day for 30 days straight. Like, that's a grind. And at the end, the buyer, picked up the phone and said, "Look, just come down so you stop calling me." But I think they appreciated that persistence, that polite persistence, right? And we went down. And honestly, I think 90% of the reason that the buyer put the product on the shelf was the passion and the purpose, those two things. I mean, think about the purpose. We were collecting used soda bottles from schools, raising money for them, taking organic waste, from coffee shops and cafeterias, and putting that all together to make this, most eco-friendly fertilizer construct that worked. We got it at a good price. You have to have those fundamentals, and there was a huge amount of passion behind it. And those two things was what gave us a shot, and not just once, but over and over and over again.
And I think passion and purpose is probably also how you ended up attracting a very talented team at the beginning, because I understand that every single one of those key people were very seasoned business professionals like Robin, right? And that's an impressive thing to do in your mid-20s, of course. Yet a few years after you signed Home Depot, Target, Walmart, TerraCycle pivoted away from organic fertilizer towards developing recycling solutions and collection systems designed to recycle, upcycle, and reuse these products and packaging that are traditionally considered non-recyclable at the standard government-run waste facilities. What prompted you to make this pivot? Because the company was moving along quite well. You were generating, a few $1,000,000 a year. So you were actually on your way to make quite a good business, in fact, with these liquid worm poops.
Our sales were 70,000 in the first year, then 500,000, then 1.5, then 3, then 6. So that's good, right? Something to be very happy about. Good, CAGR as you look at year over year growth. But what was bothering me a little bit was that we had begun this whole thing because of the fascination of the topic of waste. And when we were making the worm poop, we were effectively a product company. And as a product company, your business hero is the product. You're going to make the very best product you can. And yes, while our rule was it must be made from waste, that was a rule, we were picking the very best type of garbage, right? Certain organic waste, but not other organic waste. Certain soda bottles, but not other soda bottles, right? We were picking the ones that weren't crushed versus the ones that may have had a dent in them or somewhat crushed. And we realized we were picking the very best of the garbage. And we would never then really dig into other types of waste as well. In parallel to that, so that was sort of one thing that was irking. And then an opportunity came up, which is brands. I think the first few was Honest Tea, Stonyfield Yogurt, and Cliff Bar. Those three. And these came up because we became friends with these founders, the sort of eco-organic product space where you have these these were sort of the generation behind me who were doing what I was, in their space, yogurt or energy bars or juice, were doing what I was trying to do on worm poop, vis-a-vis make a more holistic, organic version of, in my world, of something like Miracle Grow. And so they came to us and said, "We see you're running this bottle brigade. We make yogurt pots that are hard to recycle, juice pouches that are hard to recycle, energy bar wrappers that are hard to recycle. Can you create a brigade, if you will, for us as well?" And so those two things came together, and we said, wait a minute, we need to shift the hero of our business from being the product to the garbage. And instead of making a product out of waste, let's figure out what we can make waste into. Now, this may seem incredibly, similar, but by shifting the focus, it was a massive fundamental pivot. And as we looked at each other, we said, it's way more exciting. It's way more purposeful. And over a 1 year, very painful process, we shifted the hero away from worm poop and into garbage. And effectively began, the journey of what we really look like today. It was a fundamental metamorphosis, from a caterpillar to a butterfly, and it took about a year. And any metamorphosis, there's a lot of pain that you go through. A lot of our management team didn't agree with this. It really required